Mike Briggs is our market analyst this week. We talked with Mike Wednesday morning about the fiscal cliff deadline in Washington, corn price possibilities, and consumer spending. We started by asking how he felt about the recent cattle market run.
Feeling pretty good about it. You know, typically this is setting up to what looks like a classic bull market rally. The feeders start the rally first, which they did last week. Then the fat cattle follow, and then eventually the meat follows after it. So hopefully that's what we have, but we've also staring right down in the abyss of the fiscal cliff. So that may knock it, that may derail it, I don't know.
Right, so for a piece here, we're almost talking about 2 weeks out, but does that concern you in terms of volatility in all markets?
Absolutely. I think the markets are going to be incredibly volatile because one day it's going to look like the sun's going to shine, the next day it's going to look like the end of the earth, and I think the markets are going to be extremely volatile. Stock market, futures market, all of it, and I think that's going to be a real problem. And you're in a position here where there is so much potential if people have the intestinal fortitude and do the right thing in Washington that you can really fire up the economic engine and really put everybody in a good position. Conversely, if they don't cowboy up, we're going to have a problem.
You know, if you had confidence in Washington, if you knew they were going to get something done, would you feel good about the consumer? Gas prices are down, meaning there's more money in your pocket, so what are the fears there?
Absolutely. The thing is eventually you're going to have all-time record beef prices. Now, if the consumer doesn't have any money, you've got a serious challenge there. So, but there's so many other good things. Like you said, gas prices lower, so they've got more disposable income because they're not pumping it away in their tank. And I think there's so many things out there that can help us, once again, if people do the right thing.
Even that, with that said, do you worry about next summer when supplies are going to be so low that those prices are probably going to be pretty high in the meat counter and restaurant either way?
It's going to be incredibly challenging for the beef industry because prices are going to be high. But let's say they come to a realistic agreement that actually is workable, that actually does what it needs to do. I think you start seeing the economic engine start firing up and everybody feels a little better. There's so much uncertainty right now. You get things going because corporations have a lot of cash. If things will start going the right way, you'll start to see some investment, you'll start to see some things go, and maybe it won't have to be as painful as it appears it may be at this time, is what I'm getting at.
Do you feel that corn is almost in a safe place right here?
Corn is at the lower end of its range. Now, we've kind of been in a range and you've kind of had to buy on the extremes and sell on the extremes. Whether or not we can actually break through that bottom and go down there to that chart gap that's down around 675, I'm not sure. I think that potential is there. But having said that, do I think corn's going to stay down there? Absolutely not. There just isn't enough corn. I think it's going to be a real struggle until the combines hit the field next fall. I really do.
We saw some news out of Japan. They decided they didn't want any more Brazilian beef. There was a scare there. Does that help U.S. export market?
You would like to think so, because Brazil had been chewing up a lot of our export demand. You would like to think they would come back here. I don't know how much of that export demand that Australia can pick up, but you would like to hope that people would come our way.
I got to think this isn't exactly, obviously you don't know how a year's going to go, but when we talked last January, I got to think this isn't the year you envisioned when we talked about record corn acres in production and what happened here. How do you look at maybe this next year?
Well, I think, once again, got a lot of potential. You should have tons and tons of acres. What we did see this year is that the genetics that they talked about are kind of there. The corn that got enough water, huge yields last year. So if you would actually have a normal weather year, I think you could have a huge corn crop, and that takes the pressure off of us immediately.
There's such a lack of supply right now after this drought, 2-year drought, Texas and now further north. Are you concerned that it's going to be really difficult to build this herd back up?
It can be. Obviously Mother Nature has got to help us because there's no grass out there right now. If you don't get any rain, there won't be any grass, then you're going to have an issue. You've got feedstuffs at an all-time low, so you've got that issue. And then on top of that, you have the looming problem with more government regulation. You start regulating to the point where you constrict this industry and give it another hurdle yet to rebuilding, you may never rebuild these herds, irregardless of what Mother Nature does. Then you're going to have feedlots start going out of business. Then you're going to start having packers go out of business because there's a serious overcapacity in both those industries. And so if we get more regulation that impedes us, you're going to have a real problem rebuilding this herd, and you're going to have astronomical meat prices for the unforeseeable future.